Done.
Welcome back, everyone, and also a warm welcome to all of you joining us online. We are live here in Lisbon, where the S&D group is hosting a crucial discussion: housing, a fundamental right or a dream. We've just had 4 breakout discussions. Now the representatives selected by each group will share the proposals with all of us in the room and, of course, around Europe. So let me now invite our 4 citizen representatives to the stage. Each will represent one key proposal that emerged from their group's discussion. Please, I'll ask you to focus on solutions. We want to hear your calls for action. Our online audience wasn't in the room, so be bold and clear, please. Now I'm going to call to the stage Barbara Bosma. Welcome, Barbara, on short-term rentals. I'm going to call João Avelar Dias, student housing. I'm going to call Ranvour Paul on affordable housing. And I'm going to call also Chiara Murray on homelessness. So, who wants to start? You want to start? Come here and tell us about your ideas and proposals. Okay, you're going to stay in there. Can go.
Thank you.
Is it working? Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Yes. So, sorry, we spoke mainly about problems. In all our countries, Airbnb is a huge problem, causing actually that people have too little houses, but also we spoke about the lack of social cohesion that it provokes. Because people don't feel that the place they live in is really their place. But Portugal seems to be really without any limits when it comes to Airbnb. So it was a good example. I think the solutions that we spoke about shortly, but yeah, we said we really need more research on how to deal with Airbnb. But one of the solutions is to get more clarity if someone is really a renter that is there as a private renter, so they have maybe one house or a part of the house that they want to rent out, or that it's a business. And when it comes to a business, we should ask them for a more fair tax. And also that we need more control when it comes to Airbnb. If anyone of our group has anything to add, please do. But this is the main points that I
Thank you so much. Now, João Avelar Dias.
Bem, eu vou falar em português.
And now we're going to listen to Ranvir Pal on affordable housing.
So we basically differentiated the affordable housing in that we need to divide whether it is what we want is affordable housings or is the social housings, because they are two completely different things. Social houses are for people who need full support of the government because they are not able or in the conditions to pay more or less anything, or are in a situation that they cannot pay, they can pay very less. Whereas we need affordable housings for the people who do have the capability to pay for the investments of around 100,000 euros or 150,000 euros and can get their houses without the help of the government by just easing in the laws and the renovations or the new constructions as possible. Whereas, for example, in our group discussion, we discovered that 15%, Portugal as a country in European Union has a rate of 15% of the vacant houses, of which 7% are the abandoned houses, which are, for now, technically no one is as the owner. It's only passing from generation to generation under the lei de herança, and the government technically can take that and reduce its problems. But for now, it's being not done because of the far right after 2023. And we, as the socialists that have been ruling this country for so many years, have to resolve these problems because we know how it can be done. And after that, as we also did study on the student integration of their housings of students, it should be done better because students are the future of this country. If they are not educated people or the younger generations, then there is no future of any country. So that's my point. It should be done by more of the government helps, discounts, or other points. That's it.
Thank you, Ranvir Pal, for your contribution. Now we're moving to homelessness. Chiara Murray.
So I'm from the office of Aona Reardon, who, if anyone here knows, he passes on his apologies, he couldn't be here, but homelessness is very much at the heart of his agenda in the Housing Committee. I think, as you said at the beginning, we found in our conversation it's quite easy to talk about challenges, but as social democrats, we are here to provide solutions and actually listen to people. So in our discussion, we kind of realized that whilst homelessness is a housing issue, it covers a very wide range of different challenges in our society. We know that it touches a lot on mental health and psychological challenges that people experience. It's connected to labour law and market regulation in terms of particularly migrants and migrants that come to our countries perhaps on the condition of employment contracts and have housing attached to that. And then when that contract is over, they're pushed into a case of homelessness and housing insecurity. We know that gender is an aspect as well, a higher proportion of single men. So there's a lot of different dimensions to housing, which is why there's two important pieces of any kind of solution. The first of which is focusing on housing in a literal sense, in terms of ensuring that we prevent people from being pushed into that situation by providing them with the homes that they need. In Ireland, we see a huge piece of that being in tenant law and tenant regulation. I know in a lot of European countries there is strong protections for tenants, but in Ireland that's not the case. And in fact, we still have no-fault eviction bans, and that's a huge reason as to why in Dublin alone we have nearly 4,000 children that are homeless. So one piece is certainly in trying to strengthen the laws of tenants, who are the most vulnerable people for homelessness, and indeed in providing social and affordable housing so that people who cannot afford homes are saved from being in a situation that they're put out on the street or into emergency accommodation. But a second piece is also ensuring that we provide the necessary social supports, that we provide mental health services, and that we give a 360 support to people experiencing homelessness, because we know that providing someone with a home is not enough to take people out of that situation. They need to be given psychological support, they need to be destigmatized, they need to feel that they're able to reach out for help and that they shouldn't be ashamed. So any useful solution needs to also ensure that they have those kinds of supports. So what we need is a long-term infrastructure around homelessness. We cannot just pour money into exclusively emergency accommodation centres or exclusively into shelters. And whilst those are incredibly important, what we need to do is also ensure that built into those services we also have other supports that can help people reintegrate in society. And as part of that, we also need to prioritize funding and housing. So it's a complex topic, and I know that that solution requires a lot of different moving parts. But the important thing is to recognize that homelessness is a very unique situation. There's also multiple different types of homelessness, and each of those has specific needs. So what we also need on a European level is a definition of homelessness and different kinds, and to then build solutions taking those different contexts into account.
Thank you so much, Chiara. Thank you, the four of you, for your words and participation. Now it's time for me to invite our MEPs to the stage for an open discussion. We're going to move to the next moment. Thank you so much once again. I'm going to call Bruno Gonçalves, Gabi Bishop, Irene Tinali, and Marit Mais. Welcome, four of you. So this is a political space, and in politics, time is limited, as you know. And just like in the European Parliament, each speaker will have 1 minute to respond to questions. You may speak more than once, but please keep it short and sharp. To everyone here in the room, if you want to ask a question, please indicate who is it for. So we now invite to the lectern the Vice President of the S&D Group, Gabi Bishop, for... No, it's not now. Now it's time for discussion, right? Yeah. Who wants to begin?
We answer questions, no?
Yeah.
So I think someone has to break the ice and come up with a question
break
from
the ice,
you.
please.
There's no escape. This is your opportunity.
Yeah. Who wants to begin with a question?
Yes.
I can see very well.
What do you think, Gabi, is the most... I will break the ice. Is the biggest challenge right now that we face when it comes to housing? The one biggest challenge?
It's really affordability of decent and good housing. And I think, as we heard from the round before, that we can address it on different levels to see if we want to have more affordable housing, what would be the things that needs to be done. And my priority would be that we come up with proposals where we have the biggest effect. You know, where we can show that tackling this, you can have a big effect. I mean, we had, for example, the short-term rentals to see how much more flats in Lisbon would be available for normal families if you would regulate short-term rentals. Or in the working group I was, and I think maybe here are some that were in my working group about the monopoly game that is going on in Lisbon, for example, and how to address this one. Maybe someone from my working group wants to come up with that? Yes.
There's a hand in there. You have a microphone?
I can scream.
Okay.
Hello,
Let's
hello.
do it.
Hello. She wants me to stand up. I have two questions. So one is, housing is not a European competence. So how do we turn it into a European competence? And how do we not allow the EPP breaking down our other priorities by using housing as an excuse, such as let's throw away environmental legislation in order to make housing more affordable and easier to do. And a question for Bruno, because he's from here. So what would be, I know we are not right now in government, but what would be the #1 solution quickest in order to make housing more affordable in the city of Lisbon?
Aha. Magic question. I was trying to trade time, plenary time with debate time with Gabi, so I was unsuccessful. I think that we have two options. I think the easiest one is fiscal one. When it comes to tax matters, this is an impact that you can see like instantly. We have tried it in Portugal with IRS deductions on housing, mainly on student housing. What happens is that at the same time, since the market is so overloaded, meaning that you have very few offer in terms of, for example, student housing, what happens is that landlords are actually not practicing the law, so they are not making contracts with the students. This means that students are still paying, they are unprotected, but they cannot deduce it on IRS, so they cannot get the discounts through the fiscal regime. The second one, and I think this needs to be with everyone, PPPs, so private-public investment, is not working on this. Not because the public does not have the will, but because the private is having margin profits so high that it is not advantageous for them to actually apply their capital on rentable housing. So I think that we have tried all the magic answers, and there is only one magic answer, that is public housing, because that's structural. Any other answer that you might have as a loophole, that is, it's not controlled by the state, meaning that it might not have a social mission. So, instant one.
And I would counter your statement by saying Europe should focus where it has the competences, and there are areas where we have competences, for example, in state aid. So it's limiting at the moment the rules that we have on European level, limiting Portugal or other countries to support more affordable housing, because it's very much focused strongly on social housing. So if we would change the state aid rules and enlarge it, so then in Lisbon and everywhere you could have more affordable housing in investment as one example, but also I will give to Irene, who was beforehand the chair of the Econ Committee regarding financialization. I think we also have competences and tools in our hands how we can support that more affordable houses are available all over Europe.
Thank you. It is indeed a complex topic, but I think we need to work on two main tracks. One is to increase the supply of affordable housing, and I think that we need to go back to public policies, public houses, and what we can do at the European level is to give available resources to provide financial instruments. So it could be funds, it could be guarantees. So there could be many different types of instruments that can be made available from Brussels. But we need to be very, very strong about it, especially now that we are getting into the new programs, into the new MFF. We will need to engage in strong battles. And these funds and money need to have attached some form of conditionality, because we cannot see what we've seen in the past in certain citizen countries, that public money from the European Union has been used to build social houses that after just a few years were privatized or gone to the market. So it can't be like that. The Commission, the European Commission, we discussed that in a hearing. The European Commission seems quite reluctant to put conditionalities on these kinds of things because they say, you know, the criteria to which the houses are managed, it's up to the member states, but I think we have to fight for stronger conditionality, because otherwise we will not solve the issue in the medium long term. So we need to create the condition to increase the supply of affordable housing. Then we also need to try to make the market work better. Also the regular market, not just the social housing market. It's true that we may want to increase the supply also in the regular market, but we need to make sure that it's not dominated by speculation So we need also to put some regulation, whether it is short-term rentals, whether it is also on the funds that are working on this. Unfortunately, one of the best tools is the fiscal tools, the taxation, which is a national competence. That is a national competence. But there are other things that could be done at the European level. So some form of regulation for short-term rentals could be done at the European level, and we are discussing it, although that is also very complex. So, Gabi, I'm just brainstorming now. I'm coming to believe that maybe the only thing that we could do is really to make a distinction, because houses are for living. Whoever wants to use it for any different purpose cannot be prohibited, but then it becomes automatically a business and has to be treated like that, with rules, with taxation, because otherwise this is something... Because otherwise we will not address it. The problem is that the housing stock is under a lot of pressure because many demands, many markets are using the same housing stock. So we can try to increase the housing stock, we can increase the supply, but the demand is virtually infinite because there are too many uses that have nothing to do with residential housing. So we need to put some regulation in there. And maybe we can accompany this with some sustainable and affordable tourism plan. And so maybe who want to have, because I don't want to block tourism, I want people to be able to travel if they want and not to pay 500 euros per night at the Majestic. Don't mistaken me. I think it's democratic to have affordable tourism, but it has to be done in the market of touristic, it's a different thing, because otherwise we are screwing up a fundamental right, which is the access to residential homes.
Thank you. I've seen 2 more hands raised. Maybe we're going to start with you, and please indicate who is the question for. Do you have the mic in there? Okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
boa tarde a todos. Eu
You'll
vou
be
falar em
next.
português, Bruno. Não sei.
In Lisbon, we would. So how could we differentiate from one region to another? And also, what about affordable housing? Actually, there are lots of rules which exclude lots of people who would have access to affordable housing normally. So how could that be resolved? Because this is something that actually can jeopardize people who need access to that affordable housing.
Want to start?
Yes, thank you.
Many questions.
Yeah, many questions, but maybe also to pick up on the last part of access to affordable housing and many of the rules that you have for accessing affordable housing. What we see, for example, in my country, in the Netherlands, that people who are living in social housing and who, in theory, no longer have the right to that social housing because they have a new job or they have a partner that also has a job, so their income is much higher than what the threshold is for the social housing, they cannot move on because there is no housing for people who can pay mid-value rent or who can buy a smaller house. It's very difficult for them to move on to the next phase. So one of the things that we really need to do also in our housing planning is to make sure that the housing stock is not only social housing, which is very important, but also housing for people who can pay, let's say, a mid-level rent, or who can buy a smaller apartment or a smaller house. And then there is a third problem that we have, is that people who are older and their children are leaving their homes, there is no availability for them to go to, let's say, a smaller apartment for senior citizens. Those houses are not there either. So our housing stock is simply not the stock that we need for the kind of population that we have. So there's many people, I have to say, like myself, I live in a big house where a family could live in, but we have to move on because the kids are gone, and you have a big house where normally a family with children should be living. But it's difficult for us also to move on to a next kind of home. So there's all these different steps that we need, but especially this step from people that are in social housing and that are no longer in need of that social housing but want to go to a mid-level rent is very difficult. So we also say that when it comes to, for example, the support of state aid for social housing, we would really like to see that there's also the possibility of state aid for mid-level rent housing, so that these people can move on and can also have a possibility to go there.
And I might add, for sort of immediate solutions, that we have a very interesting initiative of mayors from Europe that worked on to develop criteria on European level that we could develop what is a housing crisis. And then to say, if these criteria for this area are fulfilled, then you can do special measures. You could use funds that maybe normally, like EU funds, you would not be able to use, but for this time where you have the housing crisis, but also where you can do other measures to fasten and speed up certain procedures that you have in the process of building houses. I think if we would have such an initiative to have a European definition and then measures to it could be something of help. We also collect in the housing committee that Irene is chairing good examples for Europe. We have cities with caps, rent caps, and to see what works well, what does not work well, can we give recommendations, even if we have no competences on European level to establish a cap, but to show what are good practices in member states that could be copied here to help to provide fast solutions. And what we discussed also in our working group, for example, if you have a city like Lisbon and you have 15% of vacant houses, you have a legal situation, that was the debate in our group, that the state could really take over some of these vacant houses under certain conditions, and with the condition, and I think you mentioned the conditionalities, to create affordable housing, and then make sure that this rent is also paid to the owners here to have a solution. So this is why we came up with to say, okay, we have very different situations in member states. There are things that Europe can address, like state aid to have more affordable rules, common definitions. But there are also things that needs to be done on national level because the situation is very different. Like, I come from Berlin, we don't have 15% vacant flats, but we have other problems that we need to address, and also a lot of speculation and financialization, and to see how we can get again to stabilize the market by a certain level of public-owned houses, because what we can see in Europe is that in member states and in cities where we have a higher level of public housing, we have more stabilized and better prices. And also to address this here, how Europe can support this.
I wanted to go on that, on the rent cap very shortly, because it might be unpopular. I could believe it as a short-term solution, but some of the data already shows, for example, in Spain, the number of black market contracts have increased. So then there is a problem that is, if the investment is reduced for the future, if you put a cap on the rent, for a simple reason that then the investor will not invest. I know we need to do something, but I think we need to go to the core on why is housing now a problem. We have two faces of the coin. The first is shortage. So you have more demand than you have of offer. But the second one is that over the last 30 years, it has become more profitable to invest in housing rather than having and creating your own company. And this was not like this on the 50s and 60s in Portugal. So I think that a lot of the regulation, because the investor that actually buys property to rent it, it doesn't care if it is a house or not. What he sees there is an instrument to create value and to have money, period. So if we want to change the chain, we should probably go to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is the low profitability of other businesses that is actually impacting the only business that will always run forever, that is housing, because people need somewhere to live. I don't know, I think that caps and even if it isn't a fundamental right, if we are going with the caps, we need to completely change our economic philosophy, and we need completely to change the philosophy of open market. But that cannot only apply to a simple market like housing. It needs to apply to much more. And that could come a conclusion that I'm not really in favor of. So I know it's a very tricky question, and that was why I was also saying that, I mean, I tend to agree with everything that Irene was saying, but at the same time, I think of what could happen, because the market is not as well intentioned as we are from this part. And this is always the problem, that is what we want to do from the legislative side, and actually what the market wants to do with the legislation that we produce.
Yeah, but so the thing is that we have been discussing different forms of possible regulation for the short-term rental, you know. So, for example, what also some cities are adopting, making a distinction depending how many days you are renting. If you are below 90 days, you are non-professional. If it's above, you become a professional, so you have stricter rules. If you rent one house or two houses, but if you rent 10, the problem is that it's not easy to control and to enforce these rules. It's very, very easy to circumvent it, because the market will always be very creative in finding ways to circumvent rules that are not easily controllable. So what I was saying is simply, probably it is simpler not to prohibit, but saying, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to live in it or to rent for people to live in? And in this case, you have a treatment. If you want to do it as a business, as a startup, because that's what it is true in Italy as well. In many cities, there are people that live on that. They live on their grandmother's inheritance. But frankly, I don't find it really fair, because those people that have inherited a big apartment, what did they do to deserve the wealth? Nothing. So, but they are probably better off than the guy that is trying to create a startup, right? And it pays more taxes, it's under more regulation. So, if you want to do a business out of the house that you have, you are free. Of course, it's a free market. I don't think we should impede that, but it's a business. It's a business. So you have to be aware that you are subject to different taxation rules, whatever it is. Otherwise, you can live in, and maybe we can make an exception, as it was at the beginning. If you want to rent a room in the house where you live, that's okay. You are going 1 week on vacation. You want to rent out for 1 week because you are on vacation, but that's your house. If it's a different house that you are using for a business, you can, of course, you can do it. I don't want to block it, but then you are doing something else. I think we need some time at a certain point to give some clarity, because otherwise it becomes really complex. No, we talk about simplification, and and the market is always a little bit regulated. No, even if you have a factory, of course, the factory is yours. I don't want to take away, but you have rules. You cannot. You have to treat your employee a certain way. You cannot pollute. You have a responsibility on the society. No.
And we did already something, and that will help. You know, we did the regulation on the short-term rentals on the platform that you need a registration number, and also you need to link it to a tax number. So that if you register on these platforms, and they have to control it, they can see if you own 50 flats to rent out or just one. And this will give us tool. It has to be implemented next year. If we do it well, it can give us tool to build up on the next steps to digitally control it, and not because we will not have people running around cities and looking if this is an Airbnb or something, but we have tools to do it. And I wanted to counter your argument. I'm living in a city and we had a cap. And we also have the possibility, you can go on a website and you can say, Bruno, I just moved to Berlin. Is the rent price right or not? You put in what kind of building you're in, and you can check what you should pay, and maybe then compare it to what someone charges you, and that you can address it. But also, when we had the rent cap, really that a lot of people would pay less for their rent. It is still a market where people can make a lot of money, but they cannot make excessive money with that. But we had a cap that you can circumvent very easily. So if I rent out my flat to you with some IKEA beds and tables in it, I can charge you anything. And that's what the market did now. So we need good regulation, but we also have to see Europe cannot do anything. There are certain things that needs to be done on national level. Taxation is one of this. But we on Europe can do some framework conditions like state aid, but also in the short-term rentals, and this will help to ease the market. But nevertheless, as we discussed here, every country would also have a look to have their housing strategy in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and also to look at different groups like students or vulnerable groups.
Sorry, our time is
I just
running
want to
out.
add one. It's less than 1 minute. And
30
that's
seconds.
That's why I believe
The
that
cap is more tricky. On the cap, I have some doubts as well. But
that's why I believe, like in anything, the best way to treat the market is to create alternative. If you have enough alternative, public alternative, then the people that are making excessive profits will no longer make excessive profits, because you already have offer enough for the ones that are the consumers. So you treat it from the consumer side, not from the producer side or from the speculator side. Because every time we try to over-regulate the market, what the market does is that they are more creative than the regulation. And they are more agile, because on the legislative side, we need to regulate and wait and regulate and wait, and then member state needs to apply. And they just need to put some to bed,
we
to IKEA
adopted
beds.
a different tool. We did the opposite. Instead of a price cap on top, we said if you rent at a low price and you have all the parameters to determine, then you have a special, very special taxation. So you incentivize, and in this way, over the years, that's at least what the agency of taxation says, it is increasing the supply of houses that are rented at a low rental, yes. Because the problem with the cap, we are looking into Barcelona example, because I think it's interesting. In just 1 year, the prices went down by 6.4%. I think it's very interesting. The problem that some economists have brought up is the issue of supply. that it seems that they're lower contracts, so it's not clear whether you have black market or just not less availability, and also the distributional effect. So the average price has gone down, but which are the rents that really went down? The top or the lower? So maybe we just did a favor to the rich ones, which sold a little bit lower there, but not the poor. So I think it's interesting to look at, to analyze and to evaluate all possible solutions, but the only thing that we cannot afford is do nothing.
Thank you so much. I'd like to give the floor to the young woman in the second row to hand this part, please. No.
So that's one. I was first.
You can go.
So maybe we can continue the discussions later. Thank you very much, and thank you for your perspectives. I have a question because I'm a member of the Regi Committee, and in the Regi Committee we are focusing on also a new priority, which is housing. And also we have brought discussions about spending cohesion money into the new priority housing. And another main topic we are working on in the Regi Committee are rural areas. So, are you discussing the issue of rural areas and the challenges also according to the topic of housing in rural areas? Because personally I think it's a really, really important topic, not only to talk about cities, also to talk about rural areas and the surrounding areas through cities, and to bring it closer together. And for me it is a big issue to talk about that, especially when cohesion money will go to the housing aspect.
Thank you so much. And sorry, really sorry, she raised her hand right at the beginning. So I'm going to ask you to be very quickly, if it's possible for you to answer that.
Well, I think we can briefly say from the perspective of cohesion, when it comes to rural housing or housing in rural areas, it's very important to make sure that it's not just housing, but it's also the other elements that you need in the area, because people will have children that will need to go to school, people will want to go to a grocery. There has to be public services, but there also have to be private services in these rural areas to make it livable areas. So not just housing, but also use the cohesion and social funds and the other funds that we have to make sure that it's a livable area and not just a house where you can live in.
Yeah, completely agree. What we see in those areas, it's this polarization that given the high prices in the cities, all the investors now invest in building only in the big cities and less in the most peripheric areas, because the profitability in cities has gone so much higher while the cost of building is still the same. And it's more difficult, so they have a double challenge. So even if sometimes people may think that in rural areas houses are cheaper, so you have less problems, but you still have problems because nobody wants to go invest there in affordable housing, and you still have needs for affordable housing, even in more peripheral areas. So I think, but here you need to rebuild the socio-economic fabric in terms of services, in terms of making that region more attractive for people, and then investments as well.
Thank you.
And maybe one more, we also look at interesting examples in member states, how we can drive prices down of building material, and also new cooperative models of doing buildings. So we had some good examples from the Netherlands and other countries, and this is very interesting also for rural areas to make them more attractive, because that the prices for the ground is cheaper, but also you have to make it more available for people to really, for example, build houses, and also offer interesting models, for example, in an aging society there, and have new models, intergenerational, for example. And here we will give some good examples for other member states to learn from that, because we have no competences there, but we have really good innovative approaches and projects all over Europe that we want to make known.
Thank you. Bruno, want to? Okay, so thank you so much to the four of you. Now, Gabi, we now invite you to the lectern for our closing words, please. The stage is all yours.
I mean, what can you say after such a rich debate, also in the working groups? I would like to start with the quote from Irene, who said, it's complex. Don't be afraid of the challenge, and that we focus really on what can Europe do and what Europe needs to do and what needs to be done on member state level. We don't want to mix it, we don't want to enlarge the competences, but we want to deliver solutions that work fast and that have a big impact. And here we are focusing, and this was already mentioned, on state aid rules. We want to enlarge the possibility for local mayors and regions to have more affordable housing, but also sufficient provision of social housing for the people in need. We also have to make sure that as we now talk about affordable housing, that we don't do it on the cost of the most vulnerable. And we have to be careful, two different things, social housing, affordable housing, that we deliver on both and in a fair way. And I think Irene said it. We can do a lot of things, but one thing we cannot do to do nothing. And this is where we have this special committee on housing, and we are proud as the S&D group because we were the ones to establish this special committee, and we will be the ones that will be working very hard with Irene, with Andreas, our coordinator, to make sure that we have concrete deliveries. And I think also when we look here, and we have Bruno, that, and we heard it a couple of times, young qualified people are the asset for the future of every country. And we cannot afford that young students, young apprentices cannot find affordable housing. And we need special programs. We have to link it with European funds to make this possible, to give every young person that wants to learn, wants to engage in the world, the possibility. We had one example of a young man here that has to commute 3 hours every day to come to get to his place of school, still living with the parents. I think here we need really also a special focus. And I think last but not least, here we have a lot to do to stop speculation and financialization, to stop the monopoly that is going on. And this is something also where Europe can come up with concrete proposals here, also to make sure that housing is really a fundamental right and that it's not a dream. And in this sense, I want to thank everyone here. I want to encourage us to be persistent here, to come up with solutions and not to think, no, who is responsible, member state, Europe. Everyone has to do their part, and we have to do concrete deliveries. And this is the spirit in which we started it, and this is the spirit in which we finish it. And we need you also with your ideas and with your questions to be successful. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to the people organizing this. To go into the public space, to have the possibility to involve everyone also with the breakout sessions. And I've never seen such a great moderator, so charming and so professional. So I think this is also part of the success of this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gabi. Thank you. Thank you to all who join us online from Lisbon. We wish you a great evening, and thank you for being part of this important conversation on housing. And now to everyone here in the room, we invite you to join us for a glass of friendship un verre d'amitié. Did I say it right? Just outside. And thank you all for being here, for your presence, for your courage. And may the conversations we had today echo behind this room and help shape a future where housing is not a dream, but a fundamental right. Have a wonderful evening, and see you later. Thank you so much.
And dear everyone, just to add also that we're celebrating a birthday tonight. Christian Vigenin has his birthday, so very happy birthday to you, Christian. And he's offering you a glass of champagne and some cake, so please join Christian.